Yeah, so I think set pieces in past expansions were kind of an exception to the standard rules when it comes to items. And the reason why we went down that road was it felt a little odd to literally get the exact same, you need two of the same item from the same boss with the same art, with the same name, just to cover both balance and resto or balance and feral. And so having it be a single piece that could change made sense in that context. But someone who is dedicated fully to a given specialization, that is who they are, that is what they are, should have some small advantages over somebody who's seamlessly changing between two specs as the need suits them. And again, what we're talking about here is just a few percent, right? It's if you want to play a certain spec for, you try to do your Mythic Plus for the week, or you're just helping your friends out, or you're jumping into PvP, missing one trait or having a slightly less effective trait, or wearing a 370 pair of shoulders because you don't have a 385 for the spec that you want, that's going to make you a couple of percent less effective.
I remember when we were first talking about the Azerite system months and months and months ago at this point, and talking about the reforging aspect of it, one of the original ideas that was being kicked around was, well, maybe you can only reforge one Azerite piece once every week or two or something like that. Yeah. And we moved away from that because, like, obviously if you are that Retribution Paladin and then your tank leaves and it's like, okay, well, now I have to go protection, it would suck to have to wait 3 weeks to have all of your Azerite gear be suited for protection.
Exactly. And then 3 more weeks to have it go back to...
Exactly, yeah.
And to be honest, it makes me wonder, Blizz, what are you doing? Do you just not understand what's going on? I mean, clearly you know what's going on, you just are choosing to ignore it? Or just not listen to it, or fall back to that whole, players don't know what they want. Players are always wrong. We know what you want. And then a few years later announce classic servers, because, the fan base does want that. They know what they want. And I understand not all criticism that comes your way is really valid or worth, diving into. It's just something small that, these 20 people are having an issue with, whatever, and you want to ignore. But sometimes some of the criticism's worth it. And it feels like whoever is going through all that stuff on your end has totally forgot what it's like to play World of Warcraft. They don't know what's going on. They just think, it's more about this crap. Yay. Ignore. But they're valid. So, why did I bring up the Q&A and everything? It's for the first few things when it comes to Azerite Armor. That's been bugging me pretty much since I hit max and figured out what the heck was going on. So, let's just get into it. So they talk about how, the armor essentially is to replace the legendaries, which is fine. One of the things I always had a problem with was you get a legendary, you get a legendary, you get a legendary, everybody gets a legendary. I hate that. I prefer my legendaries to be something very uncommon. Like the Warglaves or something like that, or Thunder Fury. Those sort of things. Yeah, it sucks that my main normally can't equip these legendaries, considering my main tends to always be a druid. But, it would be cool to have legendaries that not everybody has. Legendary sort of loses its status when everybody and their grandmother has it just for going through a quest line. Or, they're just dropping like candy. And that's fine. The Azerite Armor takes the place of the legendary system that they've been doing for the past, 2 expansions, essentially. I got that. It also takes the places of, the artifact weapons, which, I have mixed feelings about that because, it's cool that some of the weapons you get and the lore behind them, that's all great and well, but I honestly think the Ashbringer should have still been its rumor type thing, not an actual artifact weapon, but hey, whatever, that's just me. That's a thing for another video. But, it takes the places of those. Alright? Cool. Got it. Now, how do I get a hold of these things? RNG. So I have no control when I get these things. Okay, I got that. Oh yeah, but by the way, it's more RNG on top of RNG, because you don't know what you're getting. You don't know what it's going to be when it does drop. And it's hard to get it, of course. And when you make things around item level, which is a thing that I also hate. I've always hated it since the mod came out to tell you what people's item levels were, because I, before then, was a raider at that point in time. And, it wasn't hard for me to go in and raid, and, I raid with my guild and everything, and I was a pretty good raider back then. But item level was never really a thing. It was all about skill. Could you survive? What you were doing. Are you not standing in the fire like a nub? Things like that. Can you click the box? And do you have enough damage to pump out and actually nuke these things? And then item level, of course, came out, and then suddenly people are like, well, if you don't have such and such item level, we're not even going to look at you. Even though you're like 10 points below such and such level, you've probably already done it, a million times. You know the fight. They're going to take this nub over here because his item level is higher. Anyway, small tangent. Back to the Azerite Armor. Azerite Armor. It's hard to get a hold of. RNG over RNG, and now they're increasing ways of getting it. And then, of course, you've got the item level. You're stuck with 340s, while you have other pieces of equipment that are like 375 or whatever, 370, and you just can't replace your Azerite Armor. So in the Q&A, they're talking about how they don't want you to respec it. They don't want you to handle this like a new set of talents, which is fine. The problem is it's like a new set of talents. If you want to optimize for a certain thing, you should be able to use a tome of whatever and be able to respec it on the fly. Just like they've been doing. And then they talk about how they want you to have multiple sets. Okay, that's cool, I guess. If I want to take up, a bunch of bag space for my other 3 specs, or for me, there's 4 specs. You got the Guardian, Resto, Balanced, and, Melee DPS, the cat. So I've got to have a set of armor for each spec if I want to do, optimal damage in that spec. Because the way the Azerite Armor is set up right now, you've got a really crappy passive that is, for whatever, and then you have, a spec-specific passive on that outer ring. And, they don't want you to respec it all the time, which is why they set the gold cost to double, blah, 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 this, that, and the other. As well as, they don't want you to feel... They want you to somehow feel like you're better if you main a particular spec. So if you're prot, and all your Azerite Armor, of course, is set up for your prot, and that's your main thing. And then you've decided, for whatever reason, they listed a few here and there, you need to go to healer or whatever, or you need to go to DPS. You can go and you reforge it. It's like 35 gold. Ooh, big whoop. No biggie. The problem is there are people who enjoy playing multiple specs. And then their thing is, if you main this particular spec, you should feel like you're doing better than somebody who respecs often. And that's where I take a little bit of an umbrage with that. It's like, for my druid, back in, I want to say, BC and Wrath. Back in Wrath, I was respecking weekly multiple times. This was before they had dual spec, which helped out a lot. Whatever my main spec for the majority of the time, I could dual spec it and then just be swapping out my secondary one. But why did I do that? It's for various reasons. When I ran dungeons, I tanked. I enjoyed doing that. I was very good at it. When I ran in raids, I was a healer, because that's what we needed, and I was very good at that too. And then when I wanted to PvP, because I was huge into PvP, I usually would have some sort of hybrid type spec with a DPS. Mainly Boomkin and whatever, so I could go in, do the charge, do the stun, that sort of thing. You know, the whole stance dancing thing, but the druid version. If you don't know what it is, go look it up. It's something that takes time to learn and skill to pull off. But anyway, I had about 3 specs that I rotated from weekly depending on what I wanted to do that week. Raids was always a given. Dungeons weren't always a necessary thing, but it was something I wanted to do on my downtime as well as PvP. So giving the ability for, dual specking, that was great. And then when they set things up to where when you respec, because back then I had multiple armor sets sitting in my armory, my bank, because of this. And it was a pain in the tail to deal with sometimes. So when they swapped it over to where you swap specs, your primaries and stuff would change too. That was like a godsend. That was amazing. I was like, yes, no longer do I have to have multiple sets of the same dang thing. And regardless, they were talking about how they don't want you to have multiple sets of the same thing, which is why they did, the tier sets this way. They set it up for tier sets to swap over and stuff, because it's kind of stupid for you to have, whatever Shattered Hand, blah, 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 and then have a second copy of it, but it's for, healing, while one is for proc. I got that. I understood that easily. I think most people do, and that's a great thing. Before then, that's exactly what we were doing, though. You see, beforehand, those who wanted to swap specs, that's what they had to do. But my point to the whole story there is, just because somebody plays multiple specs does not mean that they're any less, or they're any lesser of a player than somebody who primarily tanks. For instance, what I was talking about is I love to tank and I love to heal, but I also love DPS. I was an expert in all those fields when I played regularly with my druid. I knew the battles, I knew what I was doing, I knew where I was in charge, what I had to do, and I was a heck of a lot better than maybe some nub that they've pulled off to, pug our last spot for whatever reason, because, somebody didn't show up, who's been maining, say, their heal spec all game, but they've never been in the fight. They've never done this. Or their gear's just not up to snuff. There's various reasons why somebody can be, that could be their bread and butter, their main thing, but they're still not as good as maybe this guy over here who changes specs weekly. Or, every other day. And I feel like that idea that just because you play a particular spec mostly means you somehow are better than somebody who swaps specs. For them to go ahead and just say, we're trying to put all this stuff in here to keep you from swapping specs. But, if you do, you're going to be penalized for it. Gravely penalized for it. Because we feel that this guy over here, or girl, or whatever, who's maining this particular spec, should have a percentage, increase better than you. You should be a little bit better for sticking to it, for sticking to the one spec. And they talk about 2%. When they were going through there, going about how everything's, it's just about a 2%, 3%. It's no biggie. You're not even going to notice it. It's negligible. Have you ever fucking raid? Seriously. My question is, have you ever fucking raided in your life? 2% could be the difference between downing a boss and wiping. 2%, 1%. I have gone through where we have gotten the boss to that 1%. And if only we had a little bit just 1% more damage output, we wouldn't have been wiped. It has happened. Many of guilds have dealt with that throughout the years. Now, I haven't really gone into raiding since essentially Wrath, because I skipped out a majority of the rest of the game and has recently come back. So a lot of my things come from back earlier raiding, when tanking was a little bit harder, when healing was a little bit harder. And even though they've changed things to the tanking, where they're not making so much damage and they're doing so much aggro, you've got to plan it a little more now. It feels more like in line with older dungeons and tanking. And that's fine, cool and all. But, at one point, a percentage matters, even if it's just 1%. And the idea that, we know a lot of people wish that if they change specs, their outer ring would reset. Because quite frankly, the inner rings don't really matter. They give you a little bit of this, that, and the other. You choose between one. Do you want a shield that pops on you every 30 seconds, or when you get stunned, do you want to automatically heal 3,000 or something? They're whatever. They're fine. But the outer wheel, and then of course their proposed new outer wheel, is the one that actually matters, even if it is a 2%. And having the ability to say, I've set up my gear for Guardian. Well, I need to go, I'm going to BG as a Boomkin. So I swapped Boomkin. Having that outer ring to reset itself for my Boomkin, that's what really needs to happen. I need to then be able to choose between the Boomkin thing that I want, and then when I go back to Guardian, it doesn't reset, no. It remembers where my Guardian was and then sets it. If I decide later that I want to choose, the other talent, because the way they're talking about is how you'll have, 2 talents per spec on the outer ring, or something like that. Say, the first one is more single target, while the other one is more of a passive to deal with AoE. And say later, I decide, I really wish I could up my AoE damage a little bit instead of the single target. For whatever reason, because, maybe I've been BGing and the trend is everybody to Zerg. Actually is kind of the trend. But whatever. And beforehand, when I started doing that, I was in single target sort of mode. And I've decided I want to up my AoE damage, spread out the stuff a little bit, give the healers a little bit of a harder time. And, then I can go Reforge. That's when I can go Reforge and go, okay, I want to set myself up, my Boomkin for more AoE damage. Then I can go Reforge. But before, but it really, really needs to have that. It sets itself for each spec. If you haven't put it in for that spec, it's reset and you can choose something new. And then if you don't like your original choice, you can go Reforge. That seems to be more sense. And, I brought up sets, and then lost myself, and how sets are different, as they said. They were a exception to the rule. The problem is, they've been doing it with every item since then, too. If I got whatever item I have, and it's set up to my Boomkin, it's got a plus, 2,000 whatever to experience in its primary. And then maybe some crit and haste, whatever else. And then I swap that to, cat form. I swap my spec to my cat form, my feral druid now. That primary swaps us from intelligence to agility. And then when I swap back, guess what? It swaps back to intelligence. It happens with every item. To sit there and tell me that a set, was the exception to the rule is just a bold-faced lie at that point. The only difference between them and any other item is the set bonus that would change. And I like sets and having set bonuses. It makes you feel good to have a tier set and to have a set bonus. You got the set 2 bonus, the set 4 bonus. Those sort of things feel good when you have those. And Azerite Armor is supposed to take the place of, the legendary system, but it doesn't take the place of the sets, according to, Blizzard. The problem is, it is taking the place of the sets, because everywhere you would have a set item, it's taking up 3 of those slots already. And they give you additional passives that could change the difference between about 2% of your damage output. They are sets. They don't say set on them, but they are replacing the sets. They should be treated the same. I understand with the whole legendary thing, legendary drops, and it's for, say, marksman, but you're a Beastmaster hunter. Well, that just sucks. You gotta farm another legendary. And then you farm said legendary, and it comes in as for survival. Yeah, I got that. That sucks. And then you continue farming until you get your Beastmaster one. And then you wear your Beastmaster one. But with these, from, these Azerite Armors, you can't farm those. Or anything. You can't really go looking for them. It's just, well, I hope one drops from the Mythic chest. Or maybe, the Battlefront's up. The Warfront's up. Hopefully, maybe I'll get an upgrade from there. Maybe I can upgrade my 340 chest finally to be in line with the rest of my armor, because I'm rocking 370 everywhere else, except for that stupid chest that I've had for months. Maybe one will drop. Oh, it's another helm. Ooh, thanks. That's real great. This is another helm for like the 4th time. Ooh, great. That needs to change. Yeah, and they're finally putting steps to do that a little bit, adding them to the emissary quest, blah, 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 yada, yada, all this other stuff. But what was really getting me was the fact that, they were saying, well, they're different than this, but they're effectively the same as that. And we don't, and then there was the whole question about how, what if you were set up to, be able to respec one piece every every week or something for free. And they're like, oh, well, we didn't want to do that because, you shouldn't have to wait 3 weeks or something to respec all your gear for a particular spec so you can then be effective in that spec. While at the same time, they're telling us, oh, we also don't want you to be as effective as somebody who just plays that one spec if you like to respec often. As well as saying, talking about how, getting set items and other things, and, it's, you gotta wait about, you'll get your full, you'll get what you're looking for if you, keep doing it for about 3 weeks, and that's totally okay. And I'm just like, what? What? You're contradicting yourself at this point. How? Do you know the words that are coming out of your mouth? Seriously. They don't want us to wait 3 weeks, but it's okay to wait 3 weeks in this case, but this case is not the same as this case because they're totally different things, yet in reality they are the exact same thing, and we don't want you to be doing this and that, and I don't want to sit there and have to hold on to multiple sets of gear. That was a pain in the ass back when I did it, and when bag space was a lot less, for crying out loud. It was like back then, your biggest bags were like 22 slots or something, 24 at the max. Now I can go to the AH and grab me a 30 slot, like for 4,000 gold or something, or 2,000 or whatever they're running at right now. But I also don't want to have to sit there and change my gear all the dang time. It was like, come on. I changed my spec, the thing should spec with me. And I shouldn't be penalized just because I like to change specs. It doesn't... That's the thing I think that got me the most, was the fact that if you change specs a lot, you're nowhere near as good as somebody who mainly does it. Which is not true. There are plenty of people out there who change their specs who are just as good, if not better, than somebody who only plays that spec. And that's where I feel that there's a huge disconnect when it comes to reforging and whether or not it will change with the spec, because they seem to think that if you only main one spec, that you somehow are inherently better than everybody else if they multi-spec. But anyway, what do you think down in the comments below? This has gone way too long. Let me know what you think about Azerite Armor and what kind of changes you want to the system and would like to see implemented, and whether or not Blizz is off their rockers with this whole thing. Till then, I will talk to you later. See ya!
Hey, thanks for watching. Don't forget to leave a comment, smash that like button, and always subscribe for more. And of course, there are other videos floating around somewhere on the screen, so click one of those and see if you can find something that suits your fancy. Till then, I'll see you later. Bye.